For clarification, how should I refer to you, Kathy or Christina? So, Christina, how do you know the defendant, Adnan Said?
I met Adnan through our mutual friend Jen. We first met on the 13th of January when Adnan, Jay, and my boyfriend at the time, Jeff, hung out in my apartment. So at the time we were strangers.
Do you know exactly what time you met the defendant?
Around 6 p.m. at night.
So supposedly after the murder.
Yeah.
So can you describe to me exactly the events that occurred in January 13th?
So Jay, who was an acquaintance to me, came uninvited to my apartment with Adnan, who barely spoke. And they came to my apartment, and Jay was acting really strange, and Adnan as well. I knew Jay as a relaxed and laid-back guy, and he was acting suspiciously chatty. And he randomly occurred to my apartment without any phone calls or warnings. He just said he wanted to hang out. And Adnan came as well, and he didn't introduce himself. He just sat on the cushions, laid back. He almost passed out. And I was just thinking to myself, who is this guy? Why is he in my apartment? And he also received a phone call as well from, I suppose, his best friend.
May you describe the reaction of the defendant to the phone call?
Yes, Adnan was scared and straddled. I remember him repeating, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? What if they're going to talk to me? And I remember he was very worried and concerned. And whatever was on the other side of the line, it was definitely not good.
Can you please tell me what happened directly after the phone call?
After following the phone call, Adnan immediately left, and Jay just followed him.
And why was that suspicious?
When I looked out my window, I saw Jay and Adnan in the car sitting for several minutes, and they just left without any notice, in a hurry, without saying where they were heading off to.
So you, as a witness, can confirm that Jay and Adnan were in fact both together after 3 p.m. on January 13th?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Does the defense have any questions?
In the library after school, January 13th, is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you have any concrete evidence to prove that you did see Adnan in the library that day?
Well, there was 2 other people with me. And I remember because of the fight I had with my boyfriend.
And what time did you see him, Mr. Said?
I already stated that 2:30 to 2:40.
How long? You mentioned that you talked with Adnan. How long was the conversation?
It was a 10-minute chat.
But, however, in your letter, you claimed that you saw the defendant in the library, but you never mentioned a specific time. Permission to go to the bench. This is a letter that Asia McLean wrote to Adnan Said. In it, Asia mentions that she did in fact see him in the library. However, no time specifically is mentioned in any of it. You claim you remember that day because it's snow that day, is that correct?
No, I said it was an ice storm. There was ice, severe ice.
That there was an ice storm. And the next 2 days of school were canceled because of it, is that correct?
Because there was severe ice.
However, this weather report says else. It's the weather report from 1999, January 13th. In this report, you can clearly see that it never snowed nor ice rains occurred January 13th, 1999. Thank you. I have no further questions.
It's the second page. It's the second page of the letter. Sis?
Hae Min Lee after school, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Could you describe Hae Min Lee?
She had her laid down, all black hair. She just
As in actions, not descriptive.
yes, she was just acting normal. She was happy that she was going to see Don after school, and yeah, she was in a hurry to see him.
So Hae Min Lee was in a rush.
To see Don, yes.
Did you see Hae Min Lee enter her car?
No, I do not remember.
So Hae Min Lee, after school, was in a rush to see Don. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In a car, and she was rushing. Is that correct?
May you please repeat your question?
Hae Min Lee was rushing to get into her car. Is that correct?
Yes, she was rushing to get to her car so she could go pick up her little cousin and afterwards meet with her boyfriend Don.
That'll be all. Thank you.
That's correct.
And how many times do you say you've met the respondent?
Only once, and that was in the Best Buy parking lot. I stated before.
And yet you have a fully descriptive analysis of his character.
I wouldn't say fully descriptive. I only met him once, and it was toward the end of the day, which means getting dark. I can't exactly remember his personal trait.
You met him once for a short period of time.
That is correct.
So, how would you describe your relationship with Adnan, considering he was the ex-boyfriend and you were the current boyfriend? Was it rather positive or negative?
I would say it was a positive.
Okay, so did you and Hae Min Lee ever get into a serious fight or argument during your relationship?
Not that I can recall.
Is it,
Do not use applications or signs for the witness space. You indicated earlier in the sense of most, so please just do that.
is it true that you and the victim were supposed to meet at 8:30 after her shift ended?
That is correct.
I have evidence here. Permission to proceed to the bench. This is a report of investigation which proves that Dawn was in fact the entire day in the lens crafter store. It states, the assigned interview, and Hae Min Lee was scheduled to work at 1800 hours on the first month, 13th date, 1999. He did not show up to work, nor did she contact anyone. Dawn said he was working at Hunt Valley Lens Crafter store on January 13, 1999. Don arrived at work at 09:02 hours, and he took a lunch break from 1300 to 10 and 1342 hours. This evidence proves that Mr. Don was in fact working the entire day and could not be associated with the murder. Thank you. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the judge has told you that we must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that on January 13th, 1999, Hae Min Lee was the victim of a cold-blooded murder by Adnan Syed. To prove this, we must look at the motive of the murder, the main accomplice, and the main evidence against Adnan Syed. Let's start with the motive of the murder. Adnan Syed is portrayed as a charismatic person. Adnan was the most popular boy in his school, had many friends, and as a devoted Muslim, he would often go to the mosque where his father worked. However, evidence suggests that that is not really the case. That is only what he wants you to believe. As he found out from this case, Adnan Syed was in fact drinking, smoking, and even having sex, and engaging in intimate relationships in his teen years. All of which actions defy his own religion in which he is so devoted towards. The worst action being intimate relationships with Hae Min Lee. in which he tried so hard to keep away from his parents. Keep in mind the relationship with Hae Min Lee was completely unknown to his parents. Now imagine the shock and terror that went through his mind when he started having suspicions that he may accidentally impregnated an underage girl before marriage. In Pakistan, such a sin would have brought such shame and dishonor to Adnan's name and family. We know this thanks to the note that AISZ hitman was able to extract, in which Adnan himself asked Aisha if Hae had any symptoms of pregnancy. Adnan had realized that the only way that he could live with himself is by killing Hae. He had reached a point in which he was defying his own religion that he was so devoted to. Being with Hae, let alone having unmarried sex, was strictly against Adnan's culture. According to the report on Islamic Fed and culture with emphasis on Pakistan, a comparative study relevant to the upcoming trial of Adnan Syed was made. It states that for her to have another man dishonored both Adnan Syed and his belief structure. It is acceptable for a Muslim man to control the actions of a woman by eliminating her. It goes on to state, within this harsh culture, he has not violated any code, but instead defended his honor. For many ethnic Pakistani men, incidences like this are commonplace, and in Pakistan, this will not have been a crime, but a question of honor. Living and knowing this drove Adnan to the brink. This may not have been a religious killing, but rather a killing of cultural values. Adnan himself prioritized his culture above all else, and the murdering of Hae Min Lee was the only way to set things straight with him. Let's talk about the witnesses that are able to testify for Adnan's guilt. Christina Vincent, also known as Kathy, and her boyfriend witnessed distress and nervousness and unnatural behavior from Adnan on the day of the murder. Krista could not be here with us today, so I could not use this. But most importantly, the primary witness himself, Jay Wilds, who actually has an alibi that matches the timestamps with the cell tower expert. Let's talk about the main accomplice, Jay Wilds. Why would Jay Wilds himself manufacture an entire alibi with all evidence listed? In this case, there is a witness who admits to being an accomplice of the murder, whose alibi is in fact verified by cell tower records and witnesses who saw both Adnan and Jay together. Kathy, Jen, Krista, and Jeff all saw Jay and Adnan for multiple hours on the day of the murder. Jay's accurate alibi depicts Adnan in certain locations at certain times, which prove Adnan's guilt. How can Mr. Wilds make up an accurate testimony against Adnan Syed when he himself knew the location of the burial site? Not only that, but Mr. Wilds himself was able to tell the police the exact location of the vehicle that Hae's body was dumped from. This information was disclosed to the public at the time. Therefore, the only way he could have known this information is if he was truly there. Now, let's ask ourselves, who would have the audacity to murder a 17-year-old Woodlawn High student? Let's talk about the possible suspects, two boyfriends, Don and Adnan. Don has an alibi, which can be verified by police reports. He says he was working at a LensCrafters store, which is proven by the manager. And not only that, Don lacks a motive of murdering Hae. There's no reason for him to murder Hae. He would not benefit in whatsoever, debunking Don as a possible suspect. On the other hand, Adnan himself, well, he has no alibi. Even Jay, an accomplice, has an alibi. If Adnan Syed were truly innocent, then why not call him to the stand? Why not let him explain himself? Instead, he is sat here silently, witnessing his future being decided for him. Not something that a truly innocent person would do. Adnan Syed is a murderer, and there's no way around it. This case contains a clear motive, people who can confirm unnatural behavior from Adnan, people who saw Adnan in the day of the murder, and most importantly, the most incriminating piece of evidence is his accomplice in the murder, who has an accurate alibi in comparison to the lack of an alibi by Adnan Syed. Don't let his charming demeanor fool you. Adnan Syed uses intellect, he uses physical strength, and most importantly, his manipulation, which led Hae Min Lee to her death, as she was the reason for Adnan's sin and guilt. Thank you.